A student election at a university halfway around the world. Doesn't exactly sound like front page news, does it? But when one happened recently in Bangladesh, it sent these huge shockwaves through the region. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating essay that argues pretty much everyone is getting this story completely wrong. So, let's get into it.
So, what kicked this all off? It was this comment from the well-known Indian diplomat Shashi Tharoor. See, the student wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami party won this surprise victory at Dhaka University, and he called it a worrying portent. That one comment from a voice that powerful basically framed the whole thing for many people as a dangerous rise of Islamism.
But here's the thing. What if that interpretation isn't just a little off? What if it misses the entire point? The source material we're looking at today offers this really bold counter-narrative. It says that to understand this one little student election, you have to first understand centuries of history and a revolution that literally just changed everything. Okay, so to really get what's happening now, we have to rewind the clock a long way. Because according to this analysis, this story doesn't start in 2024. No, it starts centuries ago, with this long, unbroken struggle for self-determination that kicked off under the British Empire. And this is where the story starts, according to this essay. Back in 1793, the British put something called the permanent settlement into place. Now, what this did was create a class of super powerful, mostly Hindu landlords, the zamindars. They were given control over the land that was worked by a majority Muslim peasantry. This wasn't just an economic system, it was a social order that basically baked deep, deep divisions right into the society. And that one decision, it lit a fuse that just kept on burning for centuries. It kicked off early peasant revolts like the Faraizi movement. It led to the 1905 partition of Bengal, which for a brief moment gave the Muslim majority a taste of self-rule before it was taken away. And it kept going, even after 1947. The zamindar rule ended, sure, but it was just replaced by domination from West Pakistan. Every single step, the source argues, was part of the same long fight. Even the 1971 Liberation War is framed here not as the final victory, but as a calculated regional realignment that just swapped one form of dependency for another. But the story doesn't end in 1971, not by a long shot. The essay argues that the decades that came next weren't an era of real freedom at all, but simply the start of a new chapter of domination, just under a different name. Yeah, the fundamental point here, according to the source, is that the real struggle for sovereignty, it never actually stopped. It just changed its shape, leading to a new period of external influence and really severe internal repression. And the evidence laid out is pretty stark. The essay points to the deadly Shapla crackdown back in 2013, a well-documented and terrifying pattern of enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings, and even U.S. sanctions against the country's elite Rapid Action Battalion for major human rights abuses. All of this, the source says, was building up to a breaking point. And that breaking point finally came in the summer of 2024. It's an event the source is very careful not to call just a protest or an uprising. They call it a revolution, one that achieved what 1971 couldn't: true independence. When the student-led protests erupted, the government's response was just brutal. Independent reports, which the source cites, estimated that as many as 1,400 people were killed in just 3 weeks. The violence was so extreme that a United Nations fact-finding mission later came to the conclusion that the abuses might actually amount to crimes against humanity. I mean, that is one of the most serious charges you can make in international law. But here's the incredible part. Instead of crushing the movement, the violence galvanized it. The regime fell, and in this essay's interpretation, this event was the country's real break, the moment it finally, truly ended decades of what it calls external supremacy. Which brings us all the way back. Full circle. With all of that history, that 200-year arc of resistance, all of it culminating in the 2024 revolution, how do we now look at that student election that started this whole conversation in the first place? Well, this brings us to two totally different ways of seeing this election. On one side, you have the worrying portent view, that this is a dangerous Islamist surge. But on the other side, you have the essay's reframe, that this was a strategic, tactical choice by a new generation to assert its newfound independence from the old guard. The central idea the source uses to explain this is what it calls Gen Z agency. It's this idea that this generation, forged in the fire of the 2024 revolution, is acting totally on its own terms. They're rejecting the old political fears, the old labels that were used to control previous generations, and they're just pragmatically using whatever tools they have available to them. And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of the essay's argument. The students' vote wasn't some wholesale endorsement of an ideology. It was a message, a crystal clear rejection of the old system. They just used the most organized, most viable political vehicle they could find to send that message loud and clear.
The source wraps it all up with this incredibly powerful metaphor. For centuries, their story was written by others, by British colonizers, by Pakistani generals, by an oppressive local elite. And now, a new generation has finally picked up the pen themselves.
And that really leaves us with this provocative final thought, one that goes way beyond Bangladesh. When a new generation starts speaking a political language we don't immediately recognize, do we just slap the old familiar labels on it and dismiss it? Or do we stop and actually learn how to listen?